The notification buzzed just as I was about to turn in for the night. It was a message from my sister. Elena, you need to see this. Maria, I wasn't sure if I should send it, but you deserve to know. Attached was a 30-second video. My heart raced as I tapped the screen to watch it. The video flickered on, showing my daughter, Sophia, sitting in my sister's living room with a glass of wine in hand and her legs crossed. She looked amused. Across from her sat my niece, Carla. My mom is such a joke, Sophia sighed, rolling her eyes. Come on, she's done nothing for me. It's embarrassing. I don't even invite people over because of her. I mean, can you imagine? Oh, yeah, my mom works at a diner and cleans houses on the side. It's so pathetic. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Pathetic. Loser. Embarrassing. Never accomplished anything. I gripped my phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. From behind the camera, Elena's voice was heard. Sophia, that's your mother. Do you even hear yourself? Sophia laughed. She acts like some self-sacrificing hero just because she worked 2 jobs. Newsflash. Parents are supposed to take care of their kids. I didn't ask for any of it. She just loves playing the martyr. The video ended, but Sophia's words echoed in my head. This was my daughter, the one I'd sacrificed everything for. 2 jobs, 15-hour days, countless nights when I was too tired to even eat, all so she could have everything I never had. And this was how she repaid me. I read Elena's follow-up message. I confronted her after this. She doesn't even feel bad, Maria. She genuinely believes it. I didn't know if I should tell you, but I couldn't keep quiet. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I set my phone down and walked to the bathroom, gripping the sink to steady myself. This wasn't just about the video, it was about everything. Sophia had always been difficult, entitled, ungrateful, and dismissive. She had grown up in a comfortable home, with new clothes, school trips, and never had to worry about money because I made sure she wouldn't. I worked endless hours to shield her from the struggles I had endured as a child, only for her to look at me with nothing but disdain. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. I could have screamed. I could have confronted her right then and there. I could have called her out for every cruel word she'd said. But no, that wouldn't be enough. She needed to learn a lesson she'd never forget. So I stayed silent. I acted normal. And by next week, she would receive the surprise of her life. The next morning, I woke up early, the weight of the video still pressing on my chest. Her words, pathetic loser, never accomplished anything, kept replaying in my mind, but I refused to let anger take over. Anger wouldn't be enough. I needed something more. I glanced at the clock. It was 6:15 a.m. She was still asleep, of course. Typical. At 27 years old, she still lived under my roof, waking up at noon, refusing to get a real job. I had made her life too easy. That was about to change. By the time she finally dragged herself out of bed, I had already finished cleaning up from breakfast. She wandered into the kitchen in her oversized sweater and pajama shorts, yawning. "Morning," she mumbled, heading straight for the fridge. "Afternoon," I corrected, putting my coffee cup in the sink. She pulled out the oat milk I had bought for her last week and poured it over the organic cereal she insisted on eating. I watched her move around the kitchen, completely unaware that everything in her life was about to shift. "I need your card later," she said casually, leaning against the counter, scrolling through her phone. "My card?" I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, there's a sale at that boutique I like. I saw this leather jacket I want." "No," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "I'm not paying for anything else for you, Sophia. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever again." Her lips parted in disbelief. "Wait, what? You're joking, right?" "Do I look like I'm joking?" She laughed. "Okay, seriously. What's wrong with you? Did something happen at work?" Work. That word hit harder than she realized. "You know what, Sophia? That's an interesting question. Did something happen at work?" I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. Let me think. I've spent the last 20 years breaking my back to keep this roof over our heads. I worked 2 jobs, gave everything I had, and in return I got a daughter who saw me as nothing more than a pathetic failure. She thought I was an embarrassment. When I heard the video message from Elena, my heart sank. I had heard it all before. My daughter's fingers tightened around her phone. Her face twisted between guilt and irritation. Mom, you're taking this way too seriously. I was just venting. I let the word venting linger in the air, my voice icy. Venting. I repeated flatly. So, calling me a failure, saying I'm embarrassing, telling Carly you're ashamed of me. You don't even want people to know I'm your mother. That's just harmless venting. She rubbed her temples, clearly frustrated. I didn't mean it like that. I was just frustrated. Frustrated with what? I demanded, my voice rising in disbelief. With living rent-free, with having food on the table every night, with never having to worry about a single bill. She rolled her eyes, clearly irritated by my words. Oh my God, here we go again. You always do this. Act like you're some saint just because you worked hard. Newsflash, Mom. Parents are supposed to provide for their kids. You're not special. And that was it. That was the moment when something inside me snapped. It wasn't anger, though. It was certainty. I stood up straighter and met her gaze. You're right, I said quietly. Parents are supposed to provide for their children. And I did. But guess what, Sophia? You're not a child anymore. I turned toward the kitchen drawer, my movements deliberate, pulling out a single envelope. I placed it down on the table in front of her. She stared at it, confused. What's this? She asked, her voice tight with confusion. Open it, I said. She hesitated, glancing at me, but eventually she tore open the envelope. As she scanned the contents, her face morphed into one of bewilderment. A job application? An apartment listing? She read aloud, her voice trailing off. She looked up at me, her brow furrowed in disbelief. What is this? I smiled, though it was far from a happy smile. Congratulations, I said, my voice calm but unwavering. You're officially on your own. The moment hung in the air, thick with disbelief. She blinked rapidly, shaking her head in denial. No, you can't be serious. Oh, I'm serious, I replied, folding my arms over my chest. You have 30 days to find a job and a new place to live. You're an adult, Sophia. It's time to start acting like one. Her eyes widened in panic. But Mom, I can't. I don't have any money. What am I supposed to do? I shook my head, my voice firm. Not my problem. This is insane, she shouted, slamming the papers down on the table. You're kicking me out over some stupid video? No, I said, my voice unyielding. I'm kicking you out because I refuse to keep supporting someone who thinks I'm worthless. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Her chest rose and fell quickly, and the arrogance she once wore so confidently had completely disappeared. She swallowed hard, her voice small. Where am I supposed to go? You're 27, I said coldly, figure it out. Her bottom lip quivered for just a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. Fine, she said through gritted teeth. I don't need you anyway. I'll go live with Dad. I couldn't help but laugh. It was bitter, the kind of laugh you give when something is so absurd it's almost tragic. Oh, Sophia, I said, shaking my head. That's the funniest thing I've heard in a long time. Your father? The man who walked out on us when you were 5? The man who hasn't sent a single child support check, not a birthday card, not a "how are you doing" in over 20 years. He's not coming to save you. Her face fell as she took in my words. Good luck with that, I said, turning my back. But you're on your own now. Her voice, softer now, called after me. Mom, can we just talk about this? I paused but didn't turn around. I let out a long exhale, then faced her one last time. The confidence, The defiance, the arrogance that had defined her for years, none of it remained. The girl I had raised, the one who had dismissed me and my sacrifices, was gone. In her place stood someone truly frightened. "We'll talk," I said, my voice calm but resolute, "after you figure out where you're going to live." I walked away then, leaving her standing at the table, staring at the reality she could no longer ignore. She was on her own now, and for the first time in her life, she would face something that wasn't mine to fix. For the next few days, the house was eerily quiet. Sophia barely spoke to me. She still used my food, slept under my roof, and connected to my Wi-Fi, but there was a palpable shift in the air. The first morning after our conversation, I woke up early as usual, made my coffee, and walked into the living room. I found her there, sitting at the table, staring at her laptop, scrolling through job postings. I raised an eyebrow. "Did you sleep?" She rubbed her face, clearly exhausted. "Not really." "That's what stress does to you," I said, sipping my coffee. "Welcome to adulthood." She let out a humorless laugh, but didn't say anything else. I said nothing more. Let her sit with it. I had carried her weight for far too long. Now it was her turn to stand on her own. By the 5th day, I saw the desperation creeping in. She came home late in the afternoon, looking defeated. "How'd it go?" I asked, glancing up from my book. "They didn't hire me," she said, throwing her bag on the chair. "I don't know. They said something about me not having enough experience, but it's a cashier job. How much experience do you need to scan a freaking barcode?" I raised an eyebrow. "I guess now you understand why people work hard to get those jobs." She didn't respond, her frustration palpable, but I could see the gears turning in her head. Maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to realize what adulthood really meant. "The world doesn't hand things to you, Sophia." She didn't respond. She just flopped onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. "Did you check out the apartments I gave you?" I asked. She scoffed. "Yeah, you expect me to afford a place that costs $1,500 a month on minimum wage? Even if I get a job, it won't be enough." I crossed my arms. "Maybe now you understand why I worked 2 jobs for years." She didn't say anything. I could tell she finally got it. By the 10th day, she started breaking down. She had applied to multiple jobs but heard nothing back. She checked apartment listings again, but everything was too expensive. Then, on that morning, came the final straw. She reached into the fridge and grabbed a yogurt, the expensive kind she always insisted on. She peeled back the lid and took a bite. I held out my hand. "That'll be $3, I said. She frowned. "What? $3? I repeated, "That's how much it costs. If you're staying here, you're paying for your own food." She stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "You're charging me for yogurt?" "Yes, seriously, Sophia," I replied calmly. "You're an adult. You're looking for a job. You need to understand how money works. That starts today." Her jaw clenched. "This is insane." "No, what's insane is me paying for everything while you sit here calling me a failure. What's insane is you being 27 years old and expecting me to take care of you like you're still a child." Her face turned red, but she didn't argue. She knew I was right. For years, she had mocked my hard work, acting like she was better than me while I was the one providing for her. Now, she finally knew what it felt like to struggle. She slammed the yogurt down on the counter and stormed off to her room. By the 15th day, she finally cracked. I was folding laundry when I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, she stood there, her eyes red, her lips pressed tightly together. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then, in a small voice, she asked, "Can we talk?" I gestured for her to come in, and she sat in the chair across from me while I sat on the bed. "I get it now," she whispered. I stayed silent and let her speak. "I thought I was better than you," she admitted, her voice cracking. "Because I went to college, because I had friends who lived differently, but I didn't see everything you did. I didn't see how hard it was for you." She wiped her nose and continued. I couldn't even get a basic job. Nobody wanted to hire me. I didn't know how expensive everything was. I didn't know how exhausting it is to worry about money every single day. And the worst part is, her voice broke, you did it alone. And I acted like you were nothing. I'm so sorry, Mom. Her shoulders shook, and for the first time in years, I saw her, no longer the entitled, spoiled version, but the lost, humbled young woman she had never been forced to become. I took a deep breath. Do you know why your father left? I asked. She sniffled, looking up at me. He just didn't love us, right? I shook my head. No, Sophia. He left because he was a coward. He didn't want responsibility. He didn't want to work hard. He thought life should be easy and that people owed him things just like you did. Her lip trembled. I never wanted that for you, I continued. I worked myself to the bone so you wouldn't have to struggle. But in doing that, I made a mistake. I protected you too much from reality. Her head lowered, and I could see she finally understood. Mom, can I start over? She asked quietly. I studied her face. For the first time, there was no arrogance, no entitlement, just genuine regret. I exhaled and nodded. That depends. Are you ready to change? She nodded quickly. Yes, I swear. I reached for her hand and squeezed it. Then let's start over. Because real revenge is making someone change from the inside out. The morning after our conversation, something was different. For the first time in years, Sophia was up before noon. I heard the creak of her bedroom door at 7 a.m., a time she usually ignored unless she had brunch plans with friends. I stayed quiet as she walked into the kitchen. She didn't immediately reach for her usual oat milk and organic cereal. Instead, she hesitated and grabbed a loaf of bread, starting to make toast, something simple and cheap, a meal she never would have chosen before she understood how expensive food could be. Good morning, I said, sipping my coffee. Morning, she mumbled, sitting at the table. She didn't have her phone in her hand. She wasn't scrolling through social media, texting friends, or watching influencers flaunt their extravagant lives. She was just sitting there, present, real. I let the silence settle before asking, "What's the plan today?" She exhaled. I have an interview." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh." She nodded, poking at her toast. "It's at the cafe down the street. It's just a waitress job, but..." She trailed off. "But it's a start," I finished for her. She nodded. I smiled slightly. "Good. Let me know how it goes." 3 days later, she got the job. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't high-paying, but it was a step forward. I could tell it was hers. I knew it because I watched her drag herself through the front door at the end of her first shift. She looked utterly defeated. Her shoulders slumped, her feet dragging as she collapsed onto the couch. With a groan, she kicked off her shoes, wincing at the relief. "Rough day?" I asked, smirking just a little as I watched her. She shot me a look that was both exhausted and annoyed. "My feet feel like they've been stomped on by a herd of elephants," she muttered, rubbing her sore arches. "And the customers, they're the worst. Some guy snapped his fingers at me like I was a dog. A woman sent back her coffee 3 times because it wasn't perfect, and a kid spilled juice all over my jeans." She paused for a second, shaking her head. "And the tips? Barely anything." I leaned back in my chair, sipping my tea. "Ah," I said, nodding. "So, working hard for little appreciation is frustrating." She nodded, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. "You have no idea." I watched her for a moment before offering. "Imagine doing that for 20 years." Her lips pressed together at the thought, and her eyes softened. After a long silence, she sighed, sitting up. "You were right," she said, her voice quieter. "I used to think you were just obsessed with work, that you didn't have a life outside of it. But I get it now. You didn't have a choice." I nodded, the weight of the years behind me heavy in my chest. "No, I didn't. And neither do you if you want a real life." She exhaled deeply, leaning back against the couch. For once, she didn't argue. A week later, her wake-up call hit even harder. She was hunched over the kitchen table, staring at the apartment listings I had given her weeks ago. But this time something had changed. She was holding a pen in one hand and a calculator in the other, doing the math. "I don't think I can afford any of these," she admitted, looking up at me. Her face was pinched with worry, the exhaustion still visible in her eyes. "Even with this job, I'd barely cover rent, and then I'd have nothing left for food or bills. It's not enough." I crossed my arms and stood tall, watching her struggle with the reality she had been avoiding. "That's reality, Sophia," I said, my voice calm but firm. "That's why people work 2 jobs, have roommates, and sacrifice luxuries. You can't have everything handed to you and expect to live comfortably." She sighed, rubbing her temples, the weight of the situation clearly getting to her. "I don't want to live like this forever." I nodded, taking a step closer to her. "Then do something about it," I said simply, my words cutting through the silence. She looked at me, eyebrows drawn in confusion. "What do you mean?" I leaned against the counter, meeting her eyes. "You have a degree, Sophia. A good one. But you've been sitting around, waiting for the perfect job to fall into your lap. It doesn't work that way. You need to work your way up, just like everyone else." Her gaze dropped to the table, her fingers nervously tapping against the surface. "I guess I was just scared," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Scared of failing. I didn't want to start at the bottom. I thought I was, I don't know, too good for it." There it was, the entitlement I had been waiting for, the one she had carried for years but had never dared to admit, even to herself. It stung to hear it out loud, but it also gave me the clarity I needed to help her see the bigger picture. I walked over to her and gently placed a hand over hers, grounding her. "You're not too good for anything, Sophia," I said, my voice softer now. "No one is. You can either keep struggling with the scraps life hands you or start building a real life for yourself. The choice is yours." She met my eyes, her expression softening. This time she nodded, really nodded. For the first time, I believed she understood. 2 days later, she came to me with a new plan. She was standing by the kitchen table, her phone in her hand, a hopeful gleam in her eyes. "I applied for a job in marketing," she said, her voice more confident than I had ever heard it. "It's not my dream job, but it's an entry-level position. If I get it, I can start saving for my own place." I smiled, genuinely proud of her. "Finally," I said, my heart lightening. "That's a great start. I'm proud of you, Sophia." She exhaled, nodding with a smile that was tinged with both relief and a bit of nervousness. "And I want to start paying rent," she added, her voice quieter now. "Even if it's just a little. I don't want to live off you anymore." I blinked, caught off guard. That was unexpected. But in that moment I saw it, the real Sophia. Not the spoiled, entitled girl who had once sneered at my hard work. Not the selfish child who believed the world owed her everything. This was a woman, one who had finally come to terms with her reality and was ready to take ownership of her life. For the first time in years, I saw the woman she was becoming, and I knew, deep down, that she was ready to take the next step. It wasn't going to be easy, but she was finally taking the first step toward independence, toward a life she had never dared to believe she could have. And for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful, not just for me, but for her too. I had been watching Sophia closely, noticing the subtle changes in her lately. Her transformation, slow as it had been, felt like it was finally gaining momentum. The old habits, the procrastination, and the apathy seemed to be fading, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose. It was late one evening when I finally said, breaking the silence, "Okay, let's start small." She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. "Start small," she echoed softly. "Yeah," I replied with a gentle smile. "You can contribute and we'll see how things go. Take it one step at a time." Her eyes seemed to brighten at the prospect of something tangible, a direction she could follow. She nodded quickly, almost as if sealing the deal with herself. It was the first time in years I had seen her so decisive. "Thanks, Mom," she said softly, almost as a whisper. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I felt a lump form in my throat. I squeezed her hand gently. "I almost did," I admitted, the honesty slipping out before I could stop it. "But I wanted you to wake up first." Sophia swallowed, and I could see the understanding settle in her eyes. It was a raw, unspoken truth between us. And for the first time in years, she didn't shy away from it. She hugged me first. It wasn't a forced gesture. It wasn't out of obligation. It was real, and it caught me off guard. But it felt like the beginning of something better, something I had longed for, even if I hadn't known how to ask for it. 3 weeks had passed since Sophia started working at the cafe. She was different now. Not the same girl who had spent days lying in bed, waiting for life to happen for her. No, this was someone new. Someone I hadn't quite recognized at first, but was starting to understand. She woke up early every morning, the sound of her footsteps in the hallway a strange comfort I hadn't realized I missed. She paid for her own groceries now. No more charging everything to my credit card. And she cooked her own meals, a far cry from her usual takeout orders that used to pile up in the fridge. Even more surprising, she had started setting aside money for rent. Not because I demanded it, but because she wanted to. She was changing, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't dared to feel in a long time: hope. One quiet Sunday evening, as I was setting the table, I heard the sound of Sophia's footsteps behind me. I turned just in time to see her walking into the kitchen, 2 plates in her hands. "I made dinner," she said, her voice soft and almost shy, as if she wasn't sure if I'd be impressed or just indifferent. I paused, taking in the simple meal she had put together. Roasted chicken with a side of vegetables, nothing extravagant, but it was hers. The faintest smile tugged at my lips. "You cooked?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Sophia let out a small laugh, the sound a bit nervous but undeniably happy. "Yeah, I figured I've been eating your food for free for 27 years. It's about time I made something for you." I couldn't help but smile, a little teary-eyed from the unexpectedness of it all. "Well, let's see if you inherited my cooking skills." We sat down at the table together, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was no tension between us. No fighting, no bitterness, no resentment. Just a mother and daughter sharing a meal. A quiet moment of connection that felt like it was building something stronger between us. Halfway through dinner, I noticed Sophia seemed a little restless. She kept fidgeting with the hem of her shirt, a clear sign she had something on her mind. I've got some good news today," she said hesitantly, but I could hear the excitement just beneath her uncertain tone. I set my fork down, giving her my full attention. "What is it?" I asked, my voice soft with curiosity. She swallowed, taking a deep breath before meeting my gaze. "I got the marketing job, the one I applied for." For a brief moment, I just stared at her, trying to process what she had said. Then, as the realization sank in, a smile spread across my face, slow and genuine. "Sophia, that's incredible," I said, my voice full of pride. She exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. "It's not perfect. It's entry-level, and the pay isn't amazing, but it's a start. And it's something I actually want to do." I could see it in her eyes, the spark of ambition that had been buried under years of entitlement and self-doubt. I couldn't be prouder of her, of the way she had fought for this chance and taken it. "I'm so proud of you," I told her, my heart full of emotion, and for the first time I meant every word. Her lips twitched into a small smile, the corners of her eyes softening with happiness. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope, sliding it across the table toward me. "I wanted to give you this," she said, her voice almost shy again. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what she meant, but I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight in my hands. I carefully opened it, and inside was a stack of cash, several $100s. "What's this?" I asked, confused. Sophia bit her lip, her face flushing slightly. "It's for rent. I've been saving up." I want to contribute, to show you that I'm serious about this, about being a better person. I know it's not much, but it's a start. My heart swelled with pride, but I felt a lump in my throat, unable to say anything for a few moments. Finally, I looked up at her, and my voice cracked slightly as I said, "Sophia, this means more than you know." She gave me a small, sheepish smile, her eyes glinting with a quiet pride that matched my own. And as I looked at her, truly looked at her, I realized that this was the moment when everything had shifted. She wasn't the girl I used to worry about. She wasn't the same person who had refused to change. No, she was growing, changing, and becoming someone new. And for the first time in years, I truly believed that she would be okay. Sophia shifted in her seat, her fingers nervously tapping against the fabric of her jeans. The tension in the room was palpable, but she was determined. "It's my first rent payment," she said, her voice a little shaky. "I know it's not much, but I wanted to contribute. I don't want to take you for granted anymore, Mom." I sat across from her, staring down at the money she had placed carefully in front of me, my heart swelling in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't just about the rent. It was the gesture, so simple yet so full of meaning. For so many years, I had been the one carrying the weight of responsibility, of motherhood, trying to protect her from the harshness of the world. But this was different. This was her way of saying she was growing up, acknowledging all that I had done for her. It was her way of apologizing, of showing gratitude, of proving that she was ready to take responsibility for herself. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat threatening to break me. I didn't expect it to hit me this way, but it did. It was the kind of moment I had been waiting for, the kind that told me that all the hard work, all the sacrifices were finally paying off. I looked up at her, my voice soft and unsteady. "You don't know how much this means to me." She nodded, her eyes brimming with something I couldn't quite place. "I think I do," she said quietly. I smiled. The gesture, not just a sign of appreciation, but a release of all the pent-up emotion I'd been carrying. I slid the money back toward her. "Keep it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her brows furrowed in confusion. "But I thought—" "I want you to grow up, Sophia," I interrupted gently. "I want you to learn responsibility, and I can see that you're doing that. You don't need to give me this. Use it for something that helps you move forward. Get your own place. Start a savings account. Whatever it is that will make your future better." Her eyes widened, the hint of tears threatening to spill over. "Are you sure?" she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I reached across the table and took her hand in mine, squeezing it tightly. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "You've already given me what I wanted, the daughter I always knew you could be." Later that evening, as I washed the dishes, I felt something shift inside me. For years, I had carried a sense of failure as a mother, wondering if I had done enough, if I had made the right choices. I had sacrificed so much, given so much, only to feel like I had raised a daughter who didn't respect me, who saw me as a failure. I had never been the perfect mother, but I had tried. And for the longest time, I had doubted whether she would ever see that. But tonight, I realized something important. Tonight, I saw the woman she was becoming. Sophia wasn't a child anymore. She was standing on her own 2 feet, figuring things out, taking responsibility. I could finally see that she had grown into someone I could be proud of. As I dried my hands, I heard her footsteps behind me. She leaned against the counter, her posture a little more tentative than usual. "Mom," she said quietly, her voice hesitant. I turned to face her, my heart heavy with 1,000 unspoken words. She took a deep breath, clearly gathering the courage to say something that had clearly been weighing on her. "I never told you why I was so angry at you before," she confessed, her eyes filled with vulnerability. I paused, turning off the faucet and giving her my full attention. "Why?" I asked, my voice soft with curiosity. She exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight she had been carrying for a long time. "I wasn't really mad at you. I was mad at myself. She paused again, the words coming slowly, carefully. I always felt like I was supposed to do something great with my life, like I was supposed to be successful. But when I wasn't, it was easier to blame you than admit that I was the problem. I let that anger build up, and I took it out on you. The confession hung in the air, and I let it settle in my mind for a moment before nodding, letting her know I understood. I get it, I said softly. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. I don't blame you anymore. I was wrong, Mom, about everything. She looked up at me then, her eyes filled with regret and longing. And I hope you can forgive me. I felt the familiar lump rise in my throat again, but this time I didn't fight it. I stepped toward her, drying my hands one last time before pulling her into a tight embrace. She didn't pull away. Instead, she held on, her arms wrapped around me as if she needed the comfort just as much as I did. I forgave you a long time ago, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I just needed you to see yourself clearly. It was a moment I had been waiting for, a moment of healing that I hadn't known I needed until it happened. We stood there for a while, not needing to say anything more, just holding each other, both of us understanding that something had changed between us. A month later, Sophia found an apartment. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small, modest space that she could call her own, but it was hers. The day she moved out, I helped her pack up the last of her things. As we stood by the door, she hugged me tightly. Thank you, Mom, she whispered, her voice thick with tears. For everything. Tears welled up in my own eyes, but I held them back. I love you, Sophia, I said, my voice catching in my throat. I love you too, she replied, her smile a little shaky but genuine. And as she walked out the door, I didn't feel sadness or resentment. I didn't feel anger or regret. What I felt was pride. Pride in her strength. Pride in the woman she had become. And as she walked out, not out of anger, not out of resentment, but out of choice, I realized something. The best revenge isn't about hurting someone back. It's about proving them wrong. It's about watching them change, seeing them grow, and knowing that all the pain and struggles have been worth it. That's the true power of forgiveness.